Welcome to Daily Plunge. We are in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 30 through 44. Now, after Martha has informed Mary that Jesus is here, he's on the scene, she runs out to go meet him. He still hasn't made it into Bethany. And she gives him the same guilt trip that Martha did. If only you had been here, our brother would not have died, right? We all do this to God, where if only you had done this, or if only you had done that, we would not have gone through this, whatever the tragedy is. I want you to understand, though, we need to understand, is that in this sin-soaked world, in the midst of all this brokenness, there is going to be tragedy. But God is affected by it. And when we hear about how Jesus sees Mary weeping, sees how their friends are weeping, and he himself weeps. The Bible tells us, especially the Old Testament tells us, God is abounding in steadfast love. God's not hard-hearted. God has compassion on us. And the hurt and the tragedy of this world affects God. It's why he sends Jesus Christ for us to redeem us from it. And so God knows the struggles that we are going through. At the same time, we also recognize that when we go through these struggles, when we go through the hurt and the pain of this world, that we grow in faith, but even more is that God is glorified. Because oftentimes in the midst and when we've come to the end of ourselves, God shows up and works. And that's exactly what happens here. Jesus says, take away the stone. And Mary says, oh man, it's going to really stink bad. He's been dead for 4 days. Now, what does 4 days of decomposition do to a body? It means that Lazarus was not going to get up on his own, right? He's really decaying fast. And Jesus says, I told you that you will see the glory of God, that God will act in the places that you would never imagine that God would act. Isn't that good news? And so Jesus then prays. Now he tells us that he prays for the benefit of all those who are listening. But he also prays because this is the way Jesus works, right? He prays to know the will of the Father and for the Father to act. And if this is true for Jesus, how much more is that true for us? If you want to see miracles happen in your life, are you praying? Are you giving your problems to God? Are you admitting that you've come to the end of your rope, the end of your abilities, and that you're giving this to God? And if we want to see miracles happen in our churches, like, long lost families come back to church, are we praying for that? Now, Jesus says he has confidence that the Father hears him, and we can have that confidence too, that God hears our voice, hears our prayers, and he calls out to death. He calls out to the dead man, get up. And he comes out. God raises the dead because God can, if he can create out of nothing, he can create something new out of a tomb. And then he says, take off the grave clothes. And that's one of the challenges for us is, will we take off the clothes of sin and death and embrace the new life in Christ? Thanks, friends. Have a blessed day.